Another word that comes up, or expression people hear to complicate our lives, is hypostatic union. Can you explain that?
Yeah. Yeah, well, that comes from, the Greek hypostasis, right? And of course, which is a way of referring to persons. So, you'd have, a union in one person, right, of two natures. Now, I better explain that to you. So the one person of Jesus, the one self-consciousness of Jesus, is in a sense unifying the two natures in himself, in his personhood. But the easier way, way to see it is that the one person is making use of both a finite nature and an infinite nature at the same time, and he's doing it as a single person in an undivided way. As I said, like when you have that moment where inside your dream world, right, when your self-conscious is in your dream world, suddenly it goes, hey, wait a minute, this is not the real world. And it wakes up, right? Your self-consciousness wakes up, recognizing simultaneously the real world and the dream world, right? And in that one sense, let us just say that the one person of Jesus unifies the restricted world and the unrestricted, the restricted nature and world, the unrestricted nature and world simultaneously in himself. So it's the unification that occurs through the person, the hypostasis of Jesus. So that's the first thing to see. Now, you have to be very careful with this and observe it, because if you don't, then you get into problems. Because, for example, you say, the Son became man, or the Word became flesh. You have to, what the church is saying is not that the infinite nature of God, the one unrestricted nature, became man. So, I mean, this is really important, because the one unrestricted nature of God can't enter into a finite nature. That would be a contradiction, not to mention that the restrictedness of the human nature would rule out the possibility of God remaining unrestricted at the same time, which God not only wouldn't do, but in all respects, out of common sense, would not engage in. Okay. So the first thing that you have to realize is the church never taught that the one unrestricted nature of God became finite. So when they say God became man, that there's a little bit of a misnomer. If you mean by God, if you mean the one unrestricted nature of God, the church never said that. What it meant is the Son of God, that second divine, independent, subjective self-consciousness, making use of the one infinite nature, that self-consciousness, that person entered into a finite nature. That's not a contradiction. Now, infinite natures entering into finite natures, that's a contradiction. Church always recognized that. Church isn't stupid, right? The church recognized that and said, no, it's the one person of the Son, the independent self-consciousness, subjective interiority of the Son, who enters into the finite nature. But that one self-consciousness is still self-conscious of himself as divine. So, of course, now we've got the problem that's almost intimated by the question. If Jesus really has a true human nature, and that self-consciousness is making use of that finite, restricted human nature, does that self-consciousness also have an awareness of himself being aware of his infinite nature? In a sense, yes. In a sense, no. And he has it, and he has an awareness of his divine nature through his human nature in a way that doesn't compromise his finite human nature. Jesus Christ is not only true God, he is true man. So he has to have a finite human nature. So he has to have, right, his self-consciousness is going to be literally embedded in a child's, not only body, but in a child's brain. So, now does that take away his infinite human nature? No. Does it take away his self-consciousness, awareness of his human nature? No. It only takes away his self-consciousness's direct apperception of divinity as he would have it in his divine nature. He's not going to have it in his human nature. So he doesn't know the full extent of his divinity. He doesn't know the what of his divinity in his human nature as he knows it in his divine nature. But he knows that he is divine. Yes, he is in touch with his divinity. He has a sense, as a human being can have a sense of this unity with the Father. He has a sense, as a human being can have it, of being transhuman, of being, sharing a nature, a divine nature with the Father, as a human being could have it, as a child could have it, and later as an adult could have it, right? And so, of course, he does have an extraordinary sense of himself. He has an extraordinary sense of himself as divine, but he doesn't have in his human nature a sense of his divine nature as he would have that awareness of his divine nature within that divine nature. So you can't do that. Otherwise, you'd literally take away his human nature, his divine nature, and his awareness of himself as divine, as he would have it through his divine nature, would take away his human nature. So the church, properly puts these restrictions on him and says, no, his consciousness is of his divinity, of his sharing a union with the Father in the way that he can have it within his human nature as a child, his human nature as an adolescent, and his human nature as an adult. He gets a fuller and fuller understanding. Now, we cannot say at all that Jesus didn't have an awareness of his divinity and of his sharing a pre-existent divine life with the Father, even as a child. He absolutely did have that awareness.
He wasn't shocked when he resurrected, like some people make it seem like.
No,
right?
He wasn't shocked when he resurrected.
And when that occurred. Right?
That's right. And that's right. And he wasn't shocked talking to the teachers, in the temple about things of which no other child could possibly know.
Right.
And of course, he's not shocked when he's in conversation with his mother about what his origins are. His mother has to have revealed something to him about his origins, obviously. So, of course, he has an obvious special knowledge. He also has an obvious special mystical union with his Father that is, of course, co-natural with the union he has in his divinity with his Father, but he cannot know transparently what that would be like, it would be like,
Let me ask
but he
you that.
knows that it is in a partial sense.